Right, so now we're talking about leveraging giving days. Right, so this, again, this phenomenon that happens with giving days. But I suspect most of you exist and continue to work throughout the rest of the year. You would like these donors to stay with you. So we're going to talk through some stuff around that. So some folks that have been here for the last couple of years, just noting I recognize I have been here as well, so this is not just repeat content. I make no promises, some of the jokes maybe, but that's just what it's going to be. So, you already know who I am, so I'll just give you two more interesting facts about me that are not just sort of who's my profile. As an undergraduate, right, I was working my way through school, but I found my way into working in a Harley shop for a little while, simply because I liked motorcycles that much. I was just a shop rat. I just pushed bikes around, but everything that came through, I gotta ride it down to the car wash to wash it and bring it back and clean it. So I gotta ride a lot of motorcycles. Turns out they needed people to work a little more than I could while I was going to school. That'd have been. And then my graduate school, so my undergraduate and graduate are actually in land management, specifically wilderness, legal exclusion of technology. I know, it's a weird wandering path. But I did my graduate school in South Africa. So I actually went over there to study like managing game parks and reserves and things like Kruger and things like that. So there's the weird facts. You probably remember those ones. But switch it up because you already know who I am from the other stuff. So again, asking this question, what in particular is challenging? And this table right here is just most of the tables are back. So what is it that's challenging about Give More 24 for you and your organization in terms of that engagement, that connection post a single day giving event? We can do silence, right? You can't carry this outside this room, no shaming people on the street. Your email follow-up is poor.
That's what the majority of our staff is focused on in the program. And I mean, that's fabulous because that's where their focus is on raising money or they use social media, or we use social media. The primary focus of most of wonderful partners is the program.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're not into this world.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yep. Just to summarize for the online folks, I'll just repeat. So her organization is human services, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of other organizations. So what it means, they're super program heavy. By design, people there should be able to deliver programs and services. So it doesn't fall on these people's radar to be like, oh, we should be thinking about our donors. We should think about, did we get more followers on Instagram? I don't really care. I'm trying to get people to learn how to prevent diabetes. That's my focus for the mission. Right? Other organizations fall in that same category. It's like super program heavy. This happens a lot with like associations, human services, healthcare organizations in particular, right? You have like 700 staff and one of them sort of focuses on communication. What about other folks?
Time. I don't have the idea of creating this website and all these other steps is a little daunting because I have so many other projects going on. And I'm it as far as arranging this part.
Yeah. It's a time not just for Give More 24, but when I start saying things, and you get to do it the rest of the year, you're like, oh, get this table. Anyone else?
How does it fit in with our other fundraising? How does it impact our donors? If they gave, we just had a gala, how does it, are we going over a different audience? Working it into our development plan and making sure it works for us.
Yeah. It's an excellent concern. I guess if that's a challenge, is a way to phrase that right. Super important to think about that. That's actually, we'll get into that a little bit. Come back here.
The challenge would be also the fall of September, very close to the end of the year, when something Thanksgiving and Christmas are around there, or maybe a real pool, something like that. Something like that, one or the other.
Yeah.
stack so close to each other, it's hard to expect people to do one or do both.
Yeah, so the challenges of competing with yourself, right? Give More 24, you're heading towards year-end appeals, you're heading towards Giving Tuesday, which is growing in momentum, right? So especially when you're one-person teams or just in general tight on time and capacity, the decision of why this one, not that one, I got to pick one over the other, you know, or saying, do we do multiple? And if we do that, like, we have different people we're going to sort of tap for our gala for Give More 24 versus end of year appeal. You're all, you know, very common challenges, and we'll get into some of that tips to try to how to sort of address that.
I know one of the challenges we have is corporations in September start setting up for the following year. So we're asking for things with only a couple of months advance, and they're like, we don't have time to get this approved.
Yeah, competing timelines. A lot of your corporate partners and things, sometimes their fiscal year runs on a calendar year. Nonprofits, our fiscal year maybe starts in July. So even that weird thing where you're asking for something and they're like, we're already done giving for this fiscal year for us. And you're like, what? We just got started. We're just getting going. Right, those can be some real big challenges then. Mic shuffle.
We're a very small organization run by like 3 people. And we do direct service to people living outside. And I think one of our challenges, this is our first time doing this, is how do we feel like we're not exploiting the people that we serve by storytelling and photos and.
Yeah, it's a huge concern that the ethical storytelling, ethical use of imagery, all that kind of stuff is important because one, you want to do service to the people you're trying to serve, but also it's important what that message is that comes across to other people that talks about you and your organization. More and more, this is coming up as a concern, right? So like 15 cents a day, it's like, you're telling me that person's life was really only about 15 cents a day? Like, oh, that's the wrong message. So yeah, so these are a lot of challenges. Some of these we'll directly talk about, some of them we might not. But you'll see sort of how we're going to approach today. Sorry. Maury's a terrible hype man. He keeps jumping on stage, but there's not a lot of build-up. Click here. All right. So one of the other things I want to do, like I said, I'm trying things a little differently today. So the first session, like, it had a big activity to get you to interact. But what I wanted to do through this is there's a number of questions and things. And some people are comfortable calling out, talking out loud. It also adds this sort of flow with the mic. So what I want you to do is I want you to be able to find a buddy, someone at your table, or if you need to move or shift, but hopefully, so like, I don't want you to be chatting with the person that works at your same organization that you came here with, right? Someone who's kind of new to you, so you can make some friends, but also so you can get conversation with someone who's outside your lens and perspective, right? Just take a moment to identify that. Maybe you just naturally all fell into the perfect seat, right? But get this figured out, because this will become sort of how we try and create engagement through this last bit. The final stretch where your energy starts dipping. And for the online folks, you can feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom when we get to the little discussion points so that you can all interact with each other there too. All right, hopefully pretty low barriers to completing this particular task. You need to sit next to someone you don't already know too well. All right, so keeping us clipping along, we're going to try and make up a couple minutes here to keep us on our ultimate timeline. So I have a quick question. So up here on the slide, there's an image, right? What do you think is going on? Again, online folks, you can just drop some comments in the Zoom room. People here in the room, what do you think is happening here? Or here? Yes, 2 monitors. So this one we'll talk out loud. Right, we'll share with the room. What do you think is going on? We'll just try and talk extra loud here. What's going on? So this person's being disrespectful, right? You feel like they're ignoring. What are some other perceptions of what's happening in this image? Checking their phone to read some news. What else can you tell me about sort of the story?
Yeah, we have no idea what's going on.
Anything? It's pretty hard. Doesn't look super happy. Do they look angry? Yes. Sure, just right in the middle.
We just broke up with him.
Just broke up? Oh, man, two people at the same moment said that. There must be some hard times happening in Vancouver this week. Right? Okay, so what about now?
Breaking news.
Breaking news?
Yeah.
What else? They're what? Lost their suitcase? Why would you think suitcase? Clearly in an airport, you can see luggage carts in the background, right? Getting an Uber ride, maybe they just landed. Maybe they're like me, they're running late to something they were supposed to be to. Once leaving, they're coordinating with the flight number, with the details, right? So what's important about this activity, right?
Perspective, context.
This is a group thing. There'll be more of this, just like the one-on-one partner buddy stuff. This was simple. The main point I'm trying to highlight here is something that was already brought up. How critical it is to not think of Give More 24 in a silo, right? As this has been a new event a couple of years ago here in the community, right? I've been lucky enough to be a part of it, I think, every year and helping. So seeing how some of the organizations are evolving and getting better, but also knowing we got groups here for their first time, right? So avoiding this trap. So that the bigger picture, the larger context is super important. Because this needs to fit in with other things that you do at your organization. Otherwise, to be honest, I have lots of projects to juggle. Like it will become this burden that's just like the extra thing that's piled on top. And to be honest, that will play out in the way you approach, the way you engage with your own network and community on this larger event. Whereas if you identify and understand how it fits and it's actually running it parallel and complementary to the other things you're trying to accomplish, a lot of these questions, what, why, how, like they just start to become a lot easier to answer. Because again, you'll figure out how technology, this platform, this event, is just a tool to accomplish things you are already trying to do. It shouldn't take you in a new direction. It shouldn't take you off course. If that's the case, I would actually encourage you, don't do it. Our communities can't afford us to be inefficient, right? We're all here because things need to legitimately happen in our communities. So we have a responsibility to be efficient and effective when we do stuff, right? So just highlighting what already came up as a particular challenge and using that as a bit of the context as we go through some of the other information today, right? Not just how can you leverage this for the one-day event, but the whole point is if it fits in with what you're doing on an ongoing basis, it's such an easier transition. When it feels completely separate, that's where, to be honest, it just stops. After the event, you're like, done, finish line. I'm going to check out until, I don't know, July next year when they run the next training. And that's why you lose momentum and you lose people in the in-between. You haven't integrated from the get-go. So again, this is where I want you to start talking with your buddy, your new friend, right? We're going to take a little second and I want you to explain and I want you to sort of how Give More 24 fits into your organization's larger context. So a couple tips, right? Conversation works best when you approach it with an inquisitive mindset, right? As people are saying things, don't just wait your turn to talk. The reason you have buddies is because I want you to actually learn about other people. Because when there's opportunities for you to share back with the larger group, I'm not going to be asking you to share your information. I'm going to be asking you to share what you've learned and heard from others. There's your tip. Sometimes I just leave that as a booby trap. So I give you the heads up because we gotta get through this. Keep you on time. So take just a minute to explain this to your buddy. Just a reminder for the online folks, you can be using the chat box in Zoom to do the same on your end. If both folks haven't had a chance to share yet, make sure you're switching it up. All right, you want to start wrapping up that sentence, that statement? All right, let's wrap it up. We'll keep us moving along here. So, one of the things I love about people and their interactions, right, is a little bit of the untold story. So one of the things I immediately noticed, right, the session I came in for part of it, my first one on project management, right, pretty much just focused on Give More 24. And if you want to know what sort of the average nonverbal was, right, it was very serious. Concerns, I got to learn these things. And you should see what the room turned into as soon as I said, share about your larger context. Almost every person smiled. A lot of people sat forward that had previously been sitting up or sitting back. And there was a lot of big gestures. Just a reminder, right? Why we do it. Like, you are obviously people that are passionate about what you're doing. More importantly, like, you're excited about what you're doing. Like, it's good to do good work. So it's really just like, in general, you can just see that across the room. There are more people smiling in that moment than my entire project management moment, which I totally get. Right? I don't necessarily get gleeful over project management either. But it was just helpful to know. So hopefully you learned a little bit about it, buddy. There's something from online.
Yeah, something from online. So Gail Bishop from Lower Columbia School of Gardens says, Give More 24 helps us reach out beyond our community to share our goals and connect with other groups that want to support us and learn from our success. Just wanted to throw that out there for them.
That's perfect, right? The networking. This may purely be an opportunity to find good partners, right? Oh, we have a youth organization. Turns out there's a organization that works with seniors. They're desperately looking for volunteers. Turns out this group is desperately looking for a place to volunteer. We didn't really know about each other until we happened to be in the same room working on an event, right? You never know what might come out of it. Again, just that quick reminder, if you hear any jargon or anything, make sure you stop it. We almost threw a pen at me. We're close, but we unpacked it quick enough. Again, just a little bit where we're going, a little bit on metrics that matter, onboarding, ongoing, and leveling up. Right, just let you know where you're at, where we're headed. Some metrics that matter. So we talk about this stuff a bunch, but why I want to talk about metrics and why I think it's so important for us to identify these things again up front. And a lot of times it's like, oh, because we need to be able to prove the ROI, the return on investment, right? That's right, I explained it before anyone can get me. Yeah. Right, and it often becomes as we're going to look at metrics because it's just a reactionary thing. We do it so people can't really hassle me later. You know, we do use them sometimes. It is a way to evaluate, again, if it was successful, right? We have our success criteria, but you do want to know, like, were we on track? Was it effective? It's also the best way to figure out what worked last year that we should keep doing, what didn't work that we can just skip. Like, we don't need to put time into it this year because we know it didn't work last year because we were paying attention. There's some data that went along with it. But my favorite reason is it quickly becomes a filter to answer questions and make decisions. Because again, as this gets going and people get excited, people are going to just pile on their hopes and dreams onto your particular campaign and project, and it's not going to be able to carry the weight of all those things. So metrics and success criteria become a real quick way to go, that sounds awesome, it sounds exciting, it's not actually what we're focusing on this particular year. So it's not a personal thing that I don't like your idea, it's your strategic thing about where we're trying to get to this particular year. And so that can be really helpful because again, managing anything is really about managing people. So using these sort of anonymous filters to be able to say yes and no and do that quickly and then be able to get back to what it is you're spending your limited time and resources on can be super helpful. So I want to go through some of these examples. Financial metrics, find a target, right? Out of the gate, in the other session we laid it, clearly part of what you're doing is because you want to raise some money, right? So that makes sense. But I think it's also very easy for us to say, we set a target of $5,000, $10,000, $60,000, whatever your target is, right? And I'm not sure how the platform works this year, but basically every fundraising platform, that's what they do. They'll be like, set your target. So it is good, it helps motivate people and all that kind of stuff. But it also becomes, a lot of times it can be a vanity metric. It's super easy to measure. So that's the one we're going to measure and care about because I can measure it easily, so it's less work. But the reality is, depending on your strategies, that might not actually be the main goal for doing this. So even in the financial realm, these are some examples of other types of metrics that might be important to your longer strategies or strategies that fit in with what you're doing on a year-round basis, right? I mean, if we set a target of $10,000 and $9,000 of that came from one donor, and then we picked up some small donations and we hit our target. In one sense, that could be success. If one of our big needs is to find new donors and grow our donor base, to be honest, that's not huge success. So that $9,000 probably came from the same person that's been given to us for years, which is great. There are also donors that's possibly aging out who we are trying to buffer the rest of our stuff around, right? So again, that vanity, it can easily lead you down this path to be like, hey, we hit the target, we're done, we're good. But if that person didn't give that $9,000 donation, like, it could be sunk, right? So even just things like percent overall increase from the previous year. Last year we made $700. This year we made $1,400. $1,400 isn't a huge amount of money. It is a 100% increase though, right? Give yourself credit for where you did make some gains and some success. And then just some of these other ones, you know, increased return on investment. So some of this might be like, well, maybe we raised the same amount of money as we did last year. It took us half the time and effort, right? We didn't have to dedicate as much staff to it because we weren't developing everything new. We sort of ran on the shoulders of what we did last year that worked, and it just didn't take as much of our time. That can be hugely successful because it meant you got to spend that time and energy elsewhere too. Right, so I think this is pretty important. Is there anyone that has any of these particular ones that sort of fall into your realm? Or is it just the target? Just the target? And again, there's no shaming, right? If you're just getting started, you're like, look, we really haven't done much of this and we've never done a giving day. Take whatever you need to, right? Like if it's simply here's our target and we're working towards it, that's still a strategic direction. Better to be strategic and be successful than to just sort of waffle or do too many things and then not achieve anything or get impact.
Yeah, so increased participation is huge for our marketing.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much they get, $2, $200, $2,000.
Yep, and in particular, so the comment for online folks was just like increased participation, increased number of donors, right? New donors. In particular, probably new to your community, or maybe not even new to your community. Maybe they've been a volunteer, but they've never donated. So now you're sort of getting into the next step. That can be huge. I mean, I've known some organizations where honestly, their whole campaign was simply about getting new people. If they got 100 people that all gave $1, that was more valuable to them than 2 people that each gave $2,000, because that's what they were focused on.
So last year, our goal was 2,000, and we had $1,000 in matching. And we made our target, we made our goal, but we had an event, we were part of an event, I should say. So now we upped it to 5,000 because we have 5,000 in matching funds. So we made it for 5, which is more than 50%, but now we're faced with, we need to do an event because that's where most of the funds came through, was the event. So that's a good stress to have because we have a partner that we're going to do it with, but we've never done Give More 24 as a collaborative event where it benefited 2 different nonprofits.
Yeah, so that challenge of it was successful if you upped your goals and targets, but your context also changed, right? Oh, we're not partnering with an organization. We got to do the event on our own. We're realizing the event was really the catalyst. So now we're actually talking about an event type project. How do we ramp up an event? Yeah, I think one, congrats on pushing yourselves, stepping to the next level. I think it's a great strategy, even for an organization who says, ultimately, we want to be able to reach $10,000. I'd say, right on. Your first campaign should be $2,000. Because you need to build your skills, right? If you've never done it, why would you expect to be really good at it, right? So, a lot of organizations, ultimately, they want to be able to get to 10,000. First year's 2, then maybe 5, then 10. Because what happens is not only do you build your skills and strategies, but so does your community. The community starts to understand how this thing works and how they can help and contribute, and then sort of let it build up over time. So I think that can be a great approach in general. And then it helps your community also see not only is there success, but you're raising the expectation for them as well. Like, if we're really going to make this happen, people, like, we need you to help step it up with us. And collectively, we're going to make a huge impact over what we did last year. But it definitely adds that stress that comes with it. Is there a question from online?
Not a question, just I think talking about financial metrics, Eddie Allen says that all of their giving campaigns this year, both at the parish and at the school, focus on participation. He's hoping to increase donors by 15 to 25%. So it's more of a head count number than. There you go.
So here we go. So it's sort of a nice lead in. Thanks for the setup. Into the other areas to be thinking about metrics, because again, a lot of times we only think about that financial. So here's some examples of other metrics that are really more about like relationships, right? So who's new, who's returning, who's given multiple years in a row, right? A returning donor, someone who gave us $20 last year, $20 this year. you wouldn't necessarily want to treat them the same as someone who has given you 20 bucks for the last 10 years, right? So understanding and even just knowing that these people fall into different groups and categories is important. But again, what are the metrics? Because those help identify what are goals, and to be honest, these ultimately drive what your strategies are, right? Purely financial, I mean, go hit up that one person with the deep pockets and call it good. That was efficient. We just got it done with one donation. Right, new versus returning volunteers, right? You're running events. So this may have nothing to do with the financial stuff that came in, but it's like last year we had 4 volunteers with us. This year we ran our own event and we have 15 volunteers that came and were a part of it. That's a huge win. But again, I would have a very different strategy in the way I would approach everything if I was focusing on one thing over the other. And again, it's not like you just have one metric you're looking at, but I would say you do need to pick only a few that are your top ones, because that's what drives your strategy. If all metrics matter, no metrics matter, and no progress gets made. So there's just some more examples. And influencers, that can mean a lot of things. That term gets thrown around. It's like, who's a social media influencer? And it's like, guy, Kawasaki, he's not gonna tweet my stuff out. He's a huge influencer. Influencers are people that move your community to action. So your biggest influencer might actually just be one of your volunteers that happens to know a bunch of people in town and can get them to do the thing and come and make a donation. So we engaged more people that actually got the word out to more people this year. Like we had 3 people that amplified last year and we had 8 this year. It's a massive increase. That's a huge win. And again, different strategy if I'm trying to reach out to my influencers that just volunteers versus just random new donors, that kind of stuff. So the last group I'd sort of throw out are sort of engagement metrics. How many new email signups did we get this year? Again, we'll talk a bit about that for sure, about how critical that is for the long play and maintaining a relationship throughout the rest of the year. New followers on social media. The one thing I would caution you against is a lot of time these engagement metrics, these are also ones that can fall into that realm of vanity metrics, right? We picked up 100 new followers on Instagram yesterday. It's like, that's cool. Do you know what that means though? What do followers on Instagram do? Oh, well, they help share our promotions. Great. Then we know the value of 100 new people following it. If you have no idea what those people on Instagram, anybody here have a mission who's like, we need more followers on social media channels? This is not in anybody's mission. It may be part of a strategy because you can play it into larger things, right? So again, these can be neat. They can be metrics sometimes though that you report simply because they're easy to track. But if you can't follow it up with why that matters, it might not be a place to sink time and energy. So now I want you to take a moment and again, talk with your buddy. And again, it's perfectly okay as well to say, I'm not 100%. I'm just sort of making this up right now. I would need to talk to my team before I would officially commit to what my top 2 metrics are. But at least get you thinking about this now while we're in the moment. So this isn't somewhere it's like, it sounds like a good idea. And then I went and I tried to actually do it and I was like, oh, that was hard, but now I forgot all the other stuff. So take a moment to just sort of identify. And again, those were just some examples. You may have other metrics, right? You might have some membership signups. Like there could be whatever is in your realm. Those were just some examples. But try and come up with this with you and your buddy real quick. The same thing, folks online. If you want to just try and identify and share in your chat.
Well, but that's all.
Again, if both people haven't had a chance to share, make sure you're switching up so both people get to share before we move on here. All right, I'm gonna bring it back to the main room here. Maury, I don't know if there was any comments you wanted to share from the online.
There's a lot.
Just pick one.
Pick one.
Here, do we have that roving mic for you so this room can hear you? Right here. We'll do this.
Yes, so options 360, which we heard about earlier, they're online and said they don't have a specific percentage goal yet, but they would like to increase awareness and new donors. And then Big Brothers Big Sisters is out of Portland, but they serve Southwest Washington. They're hoping to get the message across that they serve up here. They serve the communities up here, and are going to try and engage that through looking at new donors to their organization from Southwest Washington.
Awesome. How about just a couple examples that people heard from their buddies? Again, I love volunteers, but to keep us clipping on. Anybody? You take it for the team? Yes.
One thing that I can have a teacher voice. One thing that we discussed was taking the donors from, oh, here doing it once to being a regular donor.
Yeah, so one-off volunteers to long-term engaged. I think it's great. Events are a great way to kick that off. One other person.
Hers was getting more well-known in the county.
So just awareness in general of your organization and what you do. Oh, you're a new organization, so.
We're expanding. We're started in Portland and now we're expanding to Southwest Washington, and there's a very big division between the two.
I'm sure you get a lot of head nods in the room about the division between Portland and Vancouver. So excellent, so good. It's good to hear that some of these other metrics are there. Again, sort of something you want to know, but then taking it to that next step and saying, and this is how we will know that. This is how we will measure and keep track. Be able to share that information back with our team and our community. And so again, to keep us clipping along, I don't think we'll get into too much of this, but just this reminder for you to think about what metrics are you intentionally not trying to focus on. And again, there's no right or wrong here, but just a reminder, because when you start talking about metrics, again, this becomes this weird event, especially in staff meetings. All of a sudden, everybody's got something they want to share, right? You should look at this. We should measure that. And then being able to say, well, this is why, and this is why not. Just that. You've heard this. This is like my fourth commercial for that. Probably hear it one or two more times, because I think super important, and in my experience, it's, you don't like to say no in nonprofits, and yet it can be the most efficient thing we do sometimes. So the other thing I want you to think about is sort of what metrics and all this means for your mindset approach. And so what I mean is really thinking about this giving day. You can come at it from a number of different angles, right? All of these are a little bit different. Sometimes about driving membership, peer-to-peer donations, matching, crowdfunding, right? So what are some of the key differences between some of these, right? Like it's a matching fund event. So what's sort of unique about that, right? Like we heard this morning in the branding session, some of the key things that come on top of that. You get to amplify your impact today. You give us $10, it's actually $20. For some of you, right, like there's matching happening from a couple of places. You might even amplify it even more, right? For every dollar you give us, it is actually $3. And I will admit, I am a total sucker for the matching thing. I love it. I do not have a lot of free funds in my world. So when you tell me, hey, if you gave $25 today, it's actually worth $50 in what we're trying to do. I'm like, right on. Like, I will do it now because next week it'll be $25 because that's all I got. So that's super effective on me. And then again, matching that with some of the other stuff that's new in the platform this year with being able to identify what particular money amounts means in real tangible life. You know, like Pencils for Promise. Like, this is a great organization in terms of being super clear. Like, this amount of money equals a backpack full of supplies. Like, oh, that's super real in my world. I can relate to that. So being able to say, well, you give $25 and look how much more it actually translates to. This is 3 more nights of meals for people that are living outside instead of 1. Right on, I'm all for it. So that's different messaging, it's different approach than you might take, say, like peer-to-peer. Right? I know that's a functionality that's there, but again, what happens with peer-to-peer is you as the organization, you're not actually making the ask as much, right? Sometimes it's a mix, like in this case, like you would have your page, and your champions could have their own, but you would take a very different approach. With anyone who's one of my champions or one of my peer fundraisers, right? I'm not asking them for any money. I am saying, here's some resources, here's a toolkit for you to go and ask on our behalf. And so the magic thing there is like, they will donate because it's just sort of implied and they're one of your champions. So I don't need to waste an ask on them for that. I say, it's the most powerful thing. One.org does this all the time. All we're asking for is your voice, right? Imagine if you said to me, you're so valuable to us. All we want you to do is help tell your story about us and our organization and what it means to you. Because we already know that will translate into funding. But I didn't ask you for any money, right? It's such a different approach and strategy and way to think about getting at some stuff. So again, you're not going to try and take on all these things, right? But you could take one or two, you could create a little mix, but that will help guide your strategy, all your messaging, all that kind of stuff, even to your branding. Like someone was saying, should we incorporate statistics? I'm sure you'll get to this with Nolan in the next session, right? Him and his info snaps, like the idea of how you can use stats and data, but you overlay it on top of a picture that is human. You get the head and the heart in both. You get one tiny compact space that you can then say on social, right? But what statistics I might include are going to be very different based on what I'm trying to do. Recruit more volunteers, but I'm also trying to use a peer-to-peer approach. So again, by owning where you're coming from, you can be more focused and efficient, and you can also own where you're not trying to go to. But again, so often people jump in and you do all the metrics and you do all the mindsets, you'll run yourself ragged in like 2 weeks. So you'll just be done. So again, say you're like, okay, we're gonna focus on matching because we really like that. Maybe in particular, we're trying to hit a $10,000 target because $10,000 translates into this particular, thing we're going to purchase, this particular amount of people we need to serve, meals we're going to serve. Maybe the pantry needs to get 2 new walk-in coolers. With this money, we could buy 1, but if you give to us tomorrow, we can buy 2. That is massive story to be able to tell. I'll pitch in. I will help buy 2 walk-in coolers, right? So, onboarding and thinking about this. I know we've done a bit of this over the past years, but just in general, it's out there. But just want to highlight a couple of these things. And again, sort of a commercial. I know a lot of you have heard about this, but just really, is your experience transactional or is it relational? A lot of us in our brains think, of course we're relational. Have you tried donating to your organization? Have you experienced that? I've worked at a lot of organizations where if I gave a little donation, I got a receipt. That sucks. That's what I get from Amazon, right? I bought some socks. I got a receipt. All right, I thought we were at a different level. I thought we were trying to make this relationship, and I was curious about what you do. And it seems you only cared on the front end, right? Like you got a lot of emotional, you can make this impact until you got my money. And then you were like, boom, thank you. Cashed you out, and now we're on our way. And in particular, it's dangerous around giving days, right? Because everything gets crunched into one day. So it does feel like it can just be a finish line, giving day's over, and we're wrapping it up. So again, a few tips and things to think about, but just thinking about that. What is it about the interaction where you try and make it feel human and about the impact and the connection they're making, not about the financial transaction?
So with regard to that, one of the things we do is we send a handwritten, generally, thank you card with a copy of the receipt. And would you define that as transactional? Because we're sending them a receipt.
No, the receipt is fine. To be honest, you should give people a receipt. They need that for the IRS and deduction. What makes me super sad is when you put 2 lines that say thank you as the top copy on your receipt, and you somehow think that translates to a thank you. Your receipt and your thank you should be set, a handwritten note plus my receipt. I don't get that from Amazon. Handwritten notes mean an immense amount. Not just to me personally, but as an organization, we send handwritten notes because we know people understand the level of attention and care that goes into those simple things. I mean, that takes people from in our community to champions in our community. We wrote a quick note and we threw in some stickers and they just knew that we thought about them as a human. So that's an awesome tactic. It's one of my favorites.
Most of our donors, we don't even know them. We get them through Benevita, a matching employee thing. But a lot of people signed up this year to do birthday fundraisers for us.
Right.
We don't even know them either. But what we do is we can click on their profile and publicly thank them on our page, and that's what we do because we have none of their information through Facebook. So, and our engagement because of that, I'm assuming, went from 14,000 last fiscal year to ending June 30th this year at over 30,000 followers. So I think that public, persona saying thank you publicly helps when you can't reach out and send a card.
Yeah, so for those online, basically to summarize, right? So like in social spaces, places where you don't have a name and an address, still finding little ways to just show gratitude. Publicly thank them, give them that visibility.
Good comment from David Page. Just said that with the current tax law changes, most people probably don't even care about their tax deductible or receipt anymore. While it's obviously something you have to do, but it is more important to engage them.
Yeah, I think historically that receipt, we felt like that's the important, like that's what we lead with. And then somehow the thank you gets tucked behind it. And you really need to shift. You start with the thank you. Here's the business stuff we got to take care of, right? But our gratitude is what comes up front. So again, lots of ways to think about that or how to get into it. So one of the other things, again, we've talked about this a bit in like trainings last year and stuff, so I won't go too much into it, but I do just want to touch base on the idea of a welcome series on emails. Because again, a lot of times we have this interaction, here's a donation, even maybe here's a quick thank you, but your ultimate goal to building relationships throughout the year really is email. Email is such a critical connection point because it is personal. Even though we may send an email to 600 people, 2,000, 10,000, on the user's end, they receive it as an individual. And the only reason you can do that is because they gave you permission somehow. By interacting with you, by making a donation, by signing up for something. So it's very personal, has the highest open rates and sort of return on engagement, almost any of the channels still. So as you can see, so this information comes from Emma, right? It's a great stat, but it's nice to know it comes from someone who actually deals with like millions of emails a year. So they actually do have some data behind sharing this, but just that 33% of people have better long-term engagement with the brand if they sort of got onboarded through a welcome series. So basically what this means is most of us, what we do, we get an email address, we add them to our list, like the one big list, right? And then boop, they just drop in and they just start getting the same thing that everybody gets. So say your efforts at Give More 24 works. I didn't know about you, but now I became aware of your organization. I even gave you $10, $20. And then the next thing I get is this communication where, again, it feels like I just jumped into the middle of a larger conversation or something. Like, I don't really know what's going on. I just sort of like walked into this. And what typically happens in person in that setting, right? Like you're at some barbecue or something. You step into the middle of a conversation. What do you typically do? Maybe get introduced or I'm gonna go get another hot dog. Right? You step out of that conversation. So welcome series is simply a way of saying, hey, you're new to us, we're new to you. We want to sort of ease you into our story, who we are, what we're about, what you can expect from our communications, before we just start hitting you with the communications. All right, email's no good if people don't open it. So by letting people know who you are, what you're about, how their involvement and support makes a difference, you've now answered the question for them when the next email shows up. Should I open this? I'm going to drop this because I suddenly started getting an echo. So again, in essence, that's what an email series is. So just real quick, it's helpful to note, the big tip here is don't start by saying our welcome series needs to be 3 emails, and then you figure out what content to shove into 3 emails. You really should figure out what's your story and what makes sense in terms of introducing people to you and what that looks like. Maybe it's just 2 emails, right? Figure out the goal and the purpose, and then figure out the best way to sort of get it there. So, yeah.
I just figured out this year, because I'm kind of slow, that Constant Contact will send me a list of my new subscribers. So now I've started to actually send them a personal thank you, and I can put what's going on right now in the email, and then ask them if they would like to stay in touch with us. Right now, we're so low staff, I just share our Facebook in case they want to jump into the story.
Yeah.
And I think that it's hard to tell if that's effective, but it feels good.
Well, I think honestly doing anything different with that group of people will have some impact for you. I think it'll start to make a difference. So what you might find is actually a lot of your platforms you're currently on and already paying for A lot of them actually have this functionality already in there. You can set it up, the series of 3 can be automated, right? So that's the other thing why I'm such a big advocate of this, because a lot of you already have access to it. You just didn't even realize it was in there, or you didn't know what it meant. You're like, welcome series. All right, I don't know what that, I'm not gonna click into that. Right, so it's something that we're digging into. So essentially there's just a couple of steps. So the first one is this, right? What are your key messages? How do you want to introduce yourself to people? Right? What is your story? Like we talked about in the branding, like who, what, why, like what's unique and special about you that other people can be a part of? Because that's that connection relationship again, right? You don't just want to blast content one way at them. They need to know how they can see themselves in your story. Then that framework, so number of emails and cadence. Cadence being frequency, right? Are we going to send them 3 emails and we're going to send it 1 a day? So in 3 days, they're just going to get, we want to space them a week apart. We want the first one, the second one comes a week later, and then the next one comes 3 weeks later, right? Some of it depends on your organization and what you do. We send out a ton of email. So for someone to get a lot of email pretty quick is actually helping set up expectations for what they're probably going to get if they're getting email from us. Whereas if you're short-staffed and you're only sending something out once a month or something like that, like feel free to space it and gap it a little bit. Again, you're introducing yourself, your real self. Whatever your frequency is, as long as it's building that clear introduction, that's effective. There is no magic, must be this particular. And then another big question is, do you add people to your main mailing list immediately and they get a welcome series, or do you sequence it? Do people not get added to your main mailing list until they've gone through your welcome series? Again, this totally depends on you and your content and what you serve it up. There isn't one that's right and one that's wrong. But again, having it be a decision you made on purpose rather than something that just sort of happened can make a big difference in the way you craft the message and how they interact with stuff. And then again, just a lot of your tools will automate this, right? Because again, there's nobody in this room who's going to be like, I can take each individual, understand when they signed up, and then send something at a very, like, that would be a waste of your time. So knowing how your systems can automate, so you just like put them in, and it just flows out from there. So a lot of times, maybe look in your systems, they get labeled as drip campaigns. Sort of drip, drip. But again, just language to look for, because it might not be called welcome series. Drip campaigns is another term, but essentially it's the same thing. So just a couple creative ways to say thank you, right? Email versus direct mail. There are still some people that get a lot of value out of direct mail. Like I said, we send handwritten notes. We send little letters that just have fun stickers, because that's who we are at NTAM. We like stickers. We like a sense of humor. We get a lot of value out of relationships for that. So, you know, here's just some information of what are some of the differences. I'll have direct mail, like it's expensive. Like we don't send it to all 2,300 people that come to the conference. But I will send it to the 10 or 15 speakers who like really showed up and stepped in when other people, you know, had to bail and things like that. So, you know, you just be strategic and targeted about where you use each tactic. Here's just an example of where you might break your donors into some different categories. In terms of, you might want to share a different message with these people, right? You wouldn't want to send the same message to someone who just gave you $10 for their first time ever. You wouldn't send it to the same person who's like, I've been giving you hundreds of dollars for years. You know, I would be really bummed if I've been given for 6, 7 years, increasing my donations, and I got an email that was like, we're so happy to meet you. Thanks for joining our donors. Oh, I mean, I've been here. You clearly didn't know that though, and you're not paying attention. So again, just an example. And again, these are, especially around the giving day, these make for some reasonable levels, right? First time versus under $100 between 1 and 2, right? This isn't like your major donor, like people who gave $10,000 or more, like that doesn't typically happen on giving day. Again, just some other examples, phone calls, social media posts, thank you videos. I know we got a couple people here that have, you know, already using some of these tactics. I'm just gonna keep us clipping along here. There's a couple of videos. Again, I'll share slides so that you guys can get these. Because honestly, because we had to use this machine, I think it broke the videos anyways. So I'll give you some examples though, because there's some very simple ways to say thank you in a video. That you don't need a videographer, you don't need to go crazy, but it's such a different story. It makes such a huge difference. So some of these last elements, right? You may hear about engagement funnels, right? So we see this all the time. So some of the things that are good about this, right? It gives you an idea that there is a process to building a relationship, right? You just don't walk up to strangers on the street and be like, hey, I'm Ash, I work at NTN, you should give me $200. I'll send you a receipt, right? That doesn't work. So you got to go through some of that. What I don't like about this classic approach though is that it implies it's just extremely linear and that only one direction is valuable, right? This idea if someone gave last year and this year they didn't, like that's a failure. It's like, yeah, but what if last year they gave us $20 and this year they showed up to volunteer at the event? They didn't give us $20, but they gave us 4 hours of their time. That's more. So that's the one thing to caution against this, because I know you'll run into it. Some of you, you may run into it in other trainings or just like searching online for resources. I'm actually a fan of this idea of user flows. Right, so here's an example, and it feels more flexible and organic in that people come to us in different ways. And it's important to recognize that those paths are all valuable, but also understanding what comes next. Right, so here's an example of like an in-person event that might happen as part of your Give More 24 experience, right? Maybe they made a donation. Maybe they signed up for email because they were just like, oh, I saw some stuff and I ended up going to your website and then I signed up. Or maybe they bought a raffle ticket at the event. Again, if you're trying to build a long-term relationship, all three of those activities should ultimately funnel through to them being on your email list and hitting that super effective welcome series, right? So understanding that ultimately we're trying to get to their email, right? You see a lot of times at these events, like how often do organizations miss the opportunity to get someone's email address off a raffle ticket? All those people bought it, they already gave you money, they are supporting your organization, and you have no idea how to connect up with them after the raffle's done. Right? So just a simple thing like that might make you be like, oh, when you get the raffle, maybe name and email address, and then phone number is the third one instead of email being after, because once they gave you their phone number, they won't give you their email, right? Just some simple things like that. So again, I already went through some of the pros and cons. I put a little link at the bottom as this new tool I recently found. It's totally free, and it's very user-friendly in terms of like trying to build out your own funnels and just see what that experience might look like. It's good for this. Honestly, I use it for our programs all the time. Like how do people get into our programs, and once they go through our programs, where are the opportunities for us to push them into other things we do? Online community space, in-person trainings, that kind of stuff. So the other thing, right, Give More 24, hit the event. So where you chime into the rest of the year is, say I gave at a donation level, I was like, I gave Pencils of Promise $150. That should buy 3 backpacks. Did you ever follow up and say, by the way, you gave your money and we've now purchased those 3 backpacks? And then a month later, I'm like, you know those 3 backpacks you purchased? We just delivered those to 3 kids. Again, it's often we front load, and then once we got the money, we forget to bring people back into the tail end of the story arc. So I think that's really important. I've shared this example before, but the best experience I ever had donating was through Malaria No More. They had this Power of One campaign where they stated $1 equaled 1 life. Because that's all it costs for the medication to help someone, sort out malaria. But what happened is I gave $3. I mean, most of the time I can't even give that little, right? And I got an email that told me exactly when they purchased the medication, when it arrived in a warehouse, when it left the warehouse, when it arrived in a country, and when it hit a particular village. And I was like, I've been a super champion of them ever since. And it's simply because they said this is what will be the impact. But then they actually showed me that it happened for real. So like we said this much equals this, and then we threw all your money in our general fund and then bought Ash a new standing desk. Right, which is what people suspect if you don't actually close that loop for them. So again, I'll rip through because we're right at the time we were trying to squeeze 10 minutes out of this. A huge fan of just sharing some gratitude sometimes, right? A lot of organizations will say thank you and give next time. And to be honest, like you completely deflate your gratitude if you throw an and in there. If you just said thank you 3 times, when the 4th time shows up, the relationship is now that I understand. When I support, I'm a part of it, there's impact, and you just appreciate it. So of course I want to come and help, right? So just be wary, because I don't know how many times I've seen this. Like I make a small donation just to like test out an organization, and I'm like, I just gave you money, and the first thing you did was ask me for more money. Could we just say thank you for a moment before we moved on to all the rest? So again, sort of like with the welcome series, right? The communications with people is trying to find the appropriate channel, appropriate topic, the right frequency. That's obviously the golden rule. We can't always hit that. We don't know exactly everyone's preference. Sometimes that takes a lot of digging. We just don't have time to get into. But at least knowing that's sort of what you're working towards. Instead of assuming everybody just wants the same channel, the same topic, the same frequency, and then you just don't get effective stuff. So a little bit of that leveling up, right? What's the history that leads to now so that we can look where we're going? So again, some of that segmentation, but the importance of knowing across, they're a volunteer, plus a donor, plus a program participant. Or how do we move one from one area to the next? You are a participant. Now get you to be a volunteer. Maybe a donor, but maybe if you're one of our program participants, we should just know, like if our services are based on you having restricted income, you are not the person I should be asking for money. You might be a great person to ask for time or just their voice, right? You see value in them beyond just money. As champions, again, how do you move people through that kind of stuff? We've done whole sessions on just sort of developing champions. I can share slide decks and resources and all that, again, especially if you do want to focus on peer-to-peer. There's some great toolkits that are just like, this is how you sort of run a peer-to-peer campaign. Get you a long ways. And then again, as you go from one year to the next, is the time for a mindset shift. Ooh, man, I'm gonna get in trouble. There's gonna be an extra S word slipped in there. Right, so just knowing, as you grow and change, so might be how you use this event in particular. Last couple, I swear. So again, we don't have time to get to this because we're shaving off the time, but just things to think about. What were the questions you couldn't answer today that you should answer when you go back to the rest of your team? And not that you're gonna do everything, but like, what is one thing you will do, what is it, Thursday? By next Thursday. Hold yourself accountable to do something with the time you spent today. And then remember, right? This is full circle. This was the title slide. These events are fun. They're exciting. Your community is awesome, right? There's amazing stuff that happens here all the time. And this event is a great way to keep reinforcing that each year. It gets bigger, more exciting. There's even better ideas people come up with. So even though it's work, enjoy it. And then and Amori wanted to share some reminders about, I don't know if that just falls into all the next stuff, but I'll just stop because you've been hearing me for 2 sessions in a row. But thank you for sharing your time with me. I understand it's valuable.